So I can see we have 13 questions. So I'll start from the first question and I'll proceed to the next. So I think I should be able to understand to whom its question is addressed. So we have a question from Perva. How the user data is acquired and used at Arup? I think this is a question for Volker.
So we have different ways of acquiring data. So so most of our acquisitions are in that matrix that I showed with the 5 different ways of sharing data in the industry. Most of it is either bilateral agreements or via API economies, or open APIs. So for an example, we consume carbon content data from a number of universities where we have validated their provenance and ingesting that via the APIs, either as batch or in whichever way we want to consume it. We're doing the same with transport data via transport APIs from around 70 cities around the world right now. And then we have bilateral data acquisition agreements. So for example, flight schedule data for any city in the world we're ingesting centrally from a number of sources that has then with it a pricing mechanism for that data, or OpenStreetMap or Google Transport API data we consume via that channel. That either goes via a data pipeline into central processing and refinement that we can provision it and use it anywhere in the firm, or we put it directly into operating groups or projects that want to use that data. And that is part of the program where I would say weekly now we identify new third-party sources that we then need to decide how we want to acquire it and how we want to engage with them.
Okay, thank you very much, Volker. So let's move on to the next question. It comes from Julia Patini, where she asks, do you think it's more appropriate to say that the blockchain increases collaboration, or perhaps that the blockchain improves information exchange procedures among the parties? Now, it's not clear to whom this question is addressed, so I'm inviting any of our panelists to pick this up.
Maybe can I start on this one?
Yeah, sure.
I think it does increases collaboration, especially because sometimes, well, let's put it this way: we do what we need to do, or what we asked by the contract. Now, if you have such a system which makes sure that the necessary collaborative steps are, let's say, necessary, because otherwise we won't get paid, or otherwise we won't get the necessary updates, then it will not just enhance collaboration, but almost force it. And I must say that on many projects, the boring part is how you maintain your data, how you share your data, and whether you submit at the end of the day your different KPIs and progresses. If you have this system implemented, then it can indeed facilitate it. And as a side effect, it will facilitate collaboration.
Thank you very much, Balint. Anyone else want to contribute to this question about collaboration? Okay, let's move on then. Now we have a question from Sagar Raut, and it's addressed to Balint again. Perhaps a couple of them, they're addressed to you, so
quite a few.
be prepared. So I'll start with the first one. So how do you see readiness of project control software tools accommodating blockchain?
So I was lucky to have quite a few conversations with third-party vendors and software providers, and the readiness is quite there. And most of them develop different API solutions or a first, let's say, draft of software, which can accommodate different blockchain solutions. I guess the readiness is more about people and the processes, not really about the technology.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. Thank you very much. Now, Let's move on. Another question addressed to you is, can we manage contract administration using blockchain alone? In such a case, do we need fully codified contracts in the form of smart legal contracts?
I think you don't need to.
Yeah.
So I think you don't need to manage everything by blockchain. There's no need for that. Most of the contract administration can be done through really good contract lifecycle management softwares. Where blockchain comes to play is where you really need the accountability and the liability. So for instance, when a contract is signed, or when that specific data is saved, that the contract was amended, not the actual amendment. That would be my answer here.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think we also had some very interesting talks yesterday about smart contracts, and there was a workshop also on Wednesday on smart contracts. So I think it would be interesting to have a look at this information when it's all recorded, and we can look back at these issues. Thank you, Balint. Let's move on. So there's another question. Let's see. Okay. Okay, we are okay with time. So sorry to put you on the spot. So I'll proceed with the next couple of questions, and then right. I think then it's addressed to Volker. So how do you benchmark IoT devices to interact with smart contracts, and is this compatible with blockchain?
So how do you benchmark? I'm not entirely sure what you mean there. Benchmark usually is like you need a few case studies and you need some experience. I would say most of the IoT devices would generate a vast amount of data. I think you need to select what is the data from there, what you actually need. So for example, if you have a sensor which measures wind speed, I think there's no point to put on data every 5 minutes record what is the wind speed. What you need is a oracle in the middle, which collects this data, and what happens that the smart contract only picks the one which reached the threshold. And then that goes to the blockchain because that's the trigger. The rest is saved on any kind of cloud solution. And yes, I believe these IoT devices are interactive with blockchain. It depends on the technology solution, but I saw a few already, so I don't see that's a big issue.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I think also this is moving the discussion towards information management and good information management, because also getting rid of the noise is very important, especially in such data-intensive environments. So our next question.
Sorry, and I see there are 3 more questions. If you want, I can start to type answers while maybe you jump to another one, because I don't want to steal anyone's thunder. So I can answer the rest other 3 by typing.
Okay, we will do that. So then we move on. Again, there is a question addressed to Volker. Volker, how do you define big data revolutions as part of a data supernova?
So data supernova is actually a research and foresight program that we created because we felt that the sort of scale and complexity around the move from this highly fragmented data world that we see in the built environment today to, if I use it as a horrible phrase, to some sort of big data scenario, there are just questions we have that are not addressed yet. So that's what we're doing through Data Supernova, either by our own research or with academic partners or with industry collaborations to create new knowledge, new insights, new capabilities. The data sharing work comes under that I showed earlier. The big data revolution is probably what's driving our overall creativity with data at scale strategy. So the big decision we made in 2017 was to no longer have data just being addressed by individual teams or skills networks or projects or businesses or operating groups, and instead to build a coherent strategy across how we want to do with data across everything that we do or wherever it touches you know, wherever data touches what we do. And it turned out to be, that's everything. So that's where the change came. And we're now working through that and going into phase 2 of that new strategy.
Thank you very much. So there's one more question for you here. It reads, like current data analytics tools such as R, Python, and so forth, are there any languages that can analyze data from blockchain?
So we have a skills program around Python or R or these sort of technical capabilities, but that's not where we start when it comes to data science or analysis. So the process we go through is identifying a use case or value proposition or business model canvas. Then we are addressing the value of the specific idea, and then how scalable and repeatable it is, either across Arup or across the industry. And at that point, we start to look at what is the appropriate method. You know, is this lending itself to a deep learning approach or natural language processing? And we're building out a library of key data science methodologies that we want to develop across Arup. And that all of that is supported by a data infrastructure program that looks at all the ingestion, transformation, pipeline, storage, etc. Technical capabilities. And we're running those through central prototypes that we identify that we want to do, like one that will start next is probably on working with Earth observation data. And we have constantly ideas coming from our businesses anywhere in the world where, you know, our water team in Shanghai wanted to look at deep learning in flood prevention measures. And the challenge we found is that there are lots of novel ideas out there and people practicing with, but sort of industrializing those and getting them to a maturity level where they can be deployed, you know, across hundreds or thousands of engineers and planners, or be used more consistently across multiple of our clients is the main challenge right now.
Yes, thank you very much. The next question is addressed to me. It says, how do you see the future of cloud BIM combined with blockchain? Since I feel current cloud BIM is vulnerable to data loss and systems failures. So yeah, many thanks for this question. That's interesting. Indeed, cloud BIM, it's supposed to be a set of different applications on the cloud. So it's not just one overarching platform that can enable that, but it's being enabled by cloud-based technologies. And indeed, because there are issues about data, especially cybersecurity, this is also a very good reason of why blockchain could help with that and could provide all these benefits that we have discussed in the previous in the session so far about the benefits of blockchain with regards to immutability also and provenance. So yeah, that's a very valid point. I just want to specify that we are not talking about a sole cloud application, but about different applications that can run on the cloud. So the next question is addressed to Sylvain. Do you think that blockchain can abstract BIM operations? And where does blockchain fit with BIM 7D or 8D? Now, I don't remember if this was defined, but perhaps you remember from your presentation. I think, Sylvain, you're muted, so you will have to unmute your microphone.
Sorry.
Great.
Thank you. I think that we have a different level of maturity between BIM and blockchain. I think BIM is becoming more and more mature, but we have a description between the two field or to specific context of the BIM and the blockchain. And I think we try inside my company to integrate blockchain project, but the problem is that we don't are totally mature on all the aspects of BIM, and particularly the 7D or 8D. We in France, not only in my company, but in France, the 5D or 5 or 4D are already or always complex to work with. So I don't think I think BIM cannot obstruct that blockchain will not obstruct by BIM, but I think the problematic is around the data and how we deal with these data, because what I see is we have more and more platforms for BIM, for blockchain, for data. And I think one of the next challenges could be how we could deal with all these platforms to bring all the data in one container on the only one, because the challenge is to centralize this data and not to have in a second way different platform to have silo between of the aspect of the project management with the data. I don't know if it's a good answer for Sagar, but it will be my point of view.
Sorry, I was muted. Thank you very much, Sylvain. I think, thank you for the answer. I think that the next question also has some relevance to what you just discussed. So perhaps you could take this up. Yeah, so the next one says, recording all this data from a construction project will cause some congestion issues due to the data volume and velocity. So the question is, what characteristics of the blockchain trilemma do you believe are more crucial to consider for construction projects between security, scalability, and decentralization? Yeah, it could fit to the previous question, but it could be relevant to Volker also. So whoever wants to respond to that.
For a start, and then Sylvain can come in.
Yeah, thanks.
So currently, all our project data is organized in private environments in our data centers, in file structures or folder structures. We're currently shifting all of that into 6 main cloud environments. So we have all the BIM 360, it goes really by vendor, so you got the Esri Atlas work, the Autodesk, the Bentleys, moving into clouds. We're making that shift to those platforms. But the big one is really what we call our unstructured data. So this is the data we generate ourselves, or data that comes from third parties that's going into its own cloud environment, probably from next year. And that is really where we organize project work. So the question around orchestration and access and security is primarily dealt with as part of those transition projects or those change projects around our data management and organization. That also includes all our enterprise data, people, finance, etc. What makes it complex, behind those 6 main environments, you then have several thousand applications and systems that we use to actually process and work with that data. The blockchain work, I just posted these different reports, is currently not really impacting on those migrations. So the blockchain work we're seeing right now, primarily at sort of prototyping or very specific use cases with specific clients who might have access to some of that data, but it's not in our core architecture right now. And the blockchain technology timeline sort of sets out a bit more that we see that probably at a later stage becoming a more critical issue for us.
Thank you very much, and also for the reports that you have shared with our attendees. Yes, Sylvain?
So I would add that it's a little bit paradoxal between BIM and the blockchain, because with BIM we are trying to aggregate all the data in the same container, and blockchain, the purpose of blockchain is more about decentralization of the data. So I think we have to evolve in the manner of leading BIM to see how we could decentralize these data regarding the BIM way of working. I think it could be a good question. So how to deal with the centralization of the data in the BIM and the decentralization is in the side of the blockchain.
Yes, what I could add to that is that there is a version of application of blockchain where you blockchain absolutely everything in that file, or you can just hashtag and point to that data in the centralized server. So two very different things. One is very light, and the other one would be much slower. So I think that there are applications for both.
Thank you, Albert. So let's move on. Our next question, it's anonymous as well. In a digital twin, should the data accessibility need to be limited depending on users' level of access privileges? So it's not specifically addressed to someone, but I remember Volker discussed about digital twins more than our other panelists. So whoever wants to pick this up.
Okay, I think I could try. I think that in fact in digital twin, data accessibility need to be limited effectively, but I understand the digital twin as something more about BIM, and because it depends on the status of the actors in the project, and all the data don't need to be shared. And some of them, for example, link to the property intellectual of the company. And for this reason, we don't need to share all the data. And the other side is we need a central container for all the data, but with a common data environment linked to the new standard of the 670 from ISO. With this approach, we can have all the data in the same container, but we could share this data, depends of the role and the status of the actor in the project. So we have to manage the access privilege in the project management.
I think if people try to unpack the digital twin question, which comes up everywhere, what we got to was there is not really one definition. That's what we called it, towards a framework for digital twins. So you have a very basic level of people just wanting to go from federation tools around production data from BIM projects, and that could be framed as a digital twin, and how do you manage the access for that, to the other extreme where people are looking to build a virtual replica of their entire water business or all their physical assets in a water network. And obviously that has very different questions. So I think the first bit that people need to define is at what level they place this idea and then deal with access, all these issues associated with that. Secondly, we don't think there is or one digital twin. You know, we will see hundreds and thousands of digital twins emerging, and they will use very different technology platforms and approaches to deliver that. So as companies, you also need to identify where you fit into those twins and how your services and activities change, because you're now engaging not with a client that has physical assets and receives services from you in person or via reports or whatever interface you have, we will basically see a sort of a digital interface directly into their virtual representation of assets. And at that point, access will become highly automated between the data infrastructures and platforms of both organizations, and will be managed through most likely through the API frameworks that both organizations have.
I think this is the point where the national digital twin aspiration or strategy can come to play, when you have all of these different digital twins, and then through different sectors, but you start to use the data together. So for example, when you have information of an infrastructure, and then of a water system, and then you have a sensor which shows whether you have flood in the area, then you can use all of this data to improve resilience or answer to the situation.
That was where my main point earlier about sharing came in. I don't think we will see for that scenario that Balint explained, a twin or a platform that a company operates to be the central repository of their data. And what we will end up is the migration from bilateral data sharing and individually defined APIs to either the government or the industry setting out data sharing standards and methodologies that makes exactly that workflow more reliable for all participants. That has worked very successfully in retail banking, and I don't want to overshare here, but I have to put another report in that talks about that. This is going to be a huge topic, because there is no organization. I think somebody showed earlier the complexity, I think it was Sylvain, the complexity in the construction value chain and how many parties are involved at any stage of that value chain, that we have just not seen anybody becoming a dominant platform provider who would do that. So I think we're going to go down the sharing model, and we just need to figure out who sets up these implementation entities or data sharing.
Thank you very much. Let's move to the next question, which is addressed to Balint. What are the current challenges in having a blockchain-based project control system? What's your recommended metrics to use to compare the performance of a traditional based project control system and a blockchain-based one? So this was actually my question. I'm really looking forward to the answer as well, because I had similar question as well. So.
Okay. That's a very good question, both of them. So the biggest challenge, one, as Volker just mentioned now, is simply the complexity. If you want to tackle with that, I guess, full speed from the beginning, it's almost set to fail. So you have to choose a burning but isolated small project control issue and then go with that. One of the examples I usually say is when I've worked in a joint venture and there were a number of different design companies involved, and the contractor and the client, I had 4 timesheets. One was my own company, another one for the project, another one for the contractor, and then there was another one which was just for the project manager who managed cost. Now all of these 4 needed to be synchronized all the time, and at some point on one of the big projects there was £500,000 lost in time, which then created a huge mess and then a big problem, and it actually created some reputational damage. It's a very simple example, but if you set up it right, blockchain can help with this control because you have just one single source, and it's a good pilot project to test whether your systems and data is ready to actually use a blockchain system. Now, another big, I would say, obstacle here is generally the quality of data. Until there is a project where the whole budget is managed on version 67 Excel, it's really difficult to step towards a blockchain solution. So data quality and have the proper tools in place which create structured data sets is key, and still on big multiple £billion projects, there are issues with that. And on the last point, how I would compare the two, it's a very good point. Probably with similar KPIs, what you would use on any project, and then see, the problem is that you never do the same project twice. You won't do it with with the usual method and with the blockchain. Where you can benchmark it, it's maybe on a transportational project where you usually have very similar projects. You have a big organization who usually deals with these kind of projects like a Network Rail or Highways England, and then they can do the proper benchmarking. And the metrics would be the same KPIs, I believe. I think you're on mute.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's very interesting. There's a dog barking outside. So let's move on. We have two more questions. Some of them we have responded to them typing, and perhaps we can take a couple of more minutes from your lunch. So the next question is from Martin Dow. Should we rethink the role of open data practices in the light of the data supernova, for example, to build in accountability?
Open data is definitely critical, but you need to see it in the context of what the Open Data Institute defines as a data spectrum. So data is either open, shared, or closed. And as an organization, you need to be able to engage with all three sort of modes of sharing. The first question we ask on open data is really how provenance is managed and how reliable that data is over time. So it is, and that is not just the technical interface and the technical availability, it's also how the organization that sits behind the open data manages the provenance. I think this will become even bigger the deeper we go into sustainable development goals, and we are starting to identify data sources that have significant societal value, where either academia or city governments or industry organizations like ourselves will say, we are quite happily sharing this data openly because we know it has greater social good or societal value attached to it. But that will go hand in hand with more sophisticated data sharing methods. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I think we had a question that we lost, and it was from Dennis Scott. I don't know.
I answered because I saw.
You've answered that already. Okay, that was a good question. So we only have. Yeah, if you want to share with us the answer, I'm interested.
Let me see, where was that question from Dennis?
Anyway, yeah.
Here you go. Yes. So, is it possible that we might end up with too many blockchain platforms that are essentially doing the same things? How can companies share their blockchain developments more openly with other companies? And what I answered here, and happy to be challenged by the panel, that it could happen, indeed, that there are too many platforms. However, I don't really see it as a problem by itself. There's a lot of different software solutions, and organizations will choose as they see fit for their own purposes. I think the key is a bit on a higher level, and I would say, and I'm curious about Volker's opinion on that, is to have a sector, across a sector, a data standard. How you standardize different real asset or asset information. In oil and gas, I could see usually there's still a large amount of data, but it's very structured because they have a standard and they use it across the globe in the sector. If there is a similar one in construction, I don't see the problem of having different tools if they speak the same language. So that's kind of my answer.
Yeah, thanks. I would be interested also to hear from Volker, because I remember you mentioned something that the platform economy is not going very well.
Yeah, so I don't think the data, so we definitely have a need for data standards and quite detailed. So, you know, we just done a project with the ODI just on naming conventions for fit out technology into buildings. You know, it's such a niche thing. And if you just do that for electrical and mechanical systems, for example, or we're doing it for lighting technologies right now, you know, so it's a huge topic. So I don't think the naming standards and schemas or ontologies will be driven through blockchain. I think that will happen in the industry where industry bodies or government will start to drive that. And then I guess the blockchain industry will benefit from that, you know, that existing. On the availability of blockchain platforms, I'm not the blockchain expert in Arup, but when we did the reports, what struck me was that the prototypes or the proof of concepts we did, there is still a transaction cost associated with blockchain. And the delivery, the service delivery through blockchain is not cheap. So I think we found there was still a question between the value you try to achieve when blockchain or a blockchain approach gets used, you know, across thousands of users, and how that changes the delivery cost in that versus building a prototype that works in one or a small number of participants. But that's, we saw as one of the barriers to entry why this is not moving to broad adoption right now. Multiple platforms, I guess, both create competition, but sometimes they also add to the cost because you don't get the economies of scale, you know, but I don't know the answer specifically to that.
And I think this upfront big cost comes from the fact that the general level of digitization in the industry is fairly low, and the using of structured data. And as I said, this is the basic. This is what a blockchain can work with. If you want a blockchain solution, but you don't have structured data sets and tools in place, then you have a good vision, but you have to invest a lot before you can get there.
I think that's the sort of the tail wagging the dog challenge, you know, yeah, or chicken and egg. I don't think we will solve the standardization and what we call cost and friction around data. We will not solve the reduction of cost and friction because we want to do blockchain. We'll be doing that because there are all sorts of business needs and reasons why we want to do that. And the faster that happens, the easier it will become for the blockchain industry to become more useful and valuable, I assume.
So what I could add to that is that there are a number of cross-ledger, cross-blockchain implementations or interoperability between blockchains. So, for example, there is this interledger protocol from Linux Foundation that you can transit information between different types of blockchain, like Ethereum and Hyperledger, for example, Hyperledger Fabric. And you can also interoperate between fiat currency and cryptocurrency, and it uses any of the two types. So we're seeing a lot of interoperability being created between the many blockchains.
Thank you, Abel. I think because we are 5 minutes over, and I know that we have the lunch break now, perhaps we can wrap it up, and we still have 2 questions that we will try to respond by typing. So at this point, yeah, for me, I really enjoyed the discussion with the panel and the questions. They were very interesting questions, all of them across different parts of the presentation. So I think there was also a very good fit between the presentations, and all this is because of Abel. So I want to say enjoy your lunch, and thank you very much for your participation.